You are standing on an ice age plain, and the ground is trembling before you can even see why. Then a mammoth steps out through the pale morning haze. First the tusks, then the head, then a wall of hair, muscle, and weight that makes every person beside you look absurdly small. You have no claws, no armor, no giant body. Just hide clothing, stone tools, wooden shafts, and a handful of other humans staring at the same animal. If this becomes a fair fight, you lose. So how did people hunt mammoths and live long enough to do it again? The first mistake is imagining the dangerous moment as a heroic duel. A mammoth could outweigh a human many times over, move faster than its bulk suggested, and turn a bad approach into disaster in seconds. Humans could not beat that with muscle. What they could do was make the encounter less fair. Picture the hours before anyone gets close. Fresh tracks cut across damp ground. Broken plants show where a herd passed. A hunter kneels beside a footprint while another watches the horizon. Wind bends the grass one way, then another. The group does not simply see a mammoth. They see direction, distance, weather, terrain, and the mood of the herd. And sometimes the best decision is to do nothing. The animals bunch together. An adult turns toward the humans. The ground ahead offers no easy retreat. Everyone stops. No dramatic charge. No glorious last stand. They back away and go home hungry. That is not failure. That is one of the reasons people survive. But we do not have to imagine every part of this story. In 1952, near Naco in southeastern Arizona, archaeologists excavated one of the clearest mammoth hunting sites in North America. The animal was a Columbian mammoth, not a woolly mammoth, wandering through Siberian snow. Around its skeleton were 8 Clovis projectile points. 5 were found in the ribcage area. Pause on that image. A mammoth skeleton in the earth, curved ribs, stone points lying where people left them roughly 13,000 years ago. Not a painting, not a legend, physical objects. Decades later, researchers returned to the old Naco collections. Small pieces of charcoal were found in sediment still attached to a mammoth bone. Radiocarbon work published in 2022 placed 3 of those charcoal samples between about 13,067 and 12,767 years ago, right in the known Clovis period. Suddenly, the question becomes much less abstract. Humans really were standing close enough to mammoths for their stone technology to end up among the bones. But Naco also gives us a warning. Archaeology shows the result far better than it shows the exact sequence of the hunt. Naco became important because the evidence was so physical. Ranchers found mammoth remains and alerted archaeologists. Soon the ground held exposed bone, disturbed soil, stone points, measurements, and questions. A curved rib lay beside an object, small enough to disappear inside a human hand. That contrast is hard to forget. One enormous animal, several tiny stone points, and unmistakable traces of people who had once stood there. And notice what is missing. There is no carved message saying, here is exactly how we did it. We know the mammoth was there. We know the Clovis points were there. We know the site belongs to the Clovis period. But the precise sequence of the hunt remains uncertain, and that uncertainty matters. There was no camera. We cannot watch the hunters approach. We cannot hear what they shouted. We cannot know which person moved first or how long the encounter lasted. And that is important because prehistoric hunting is easy to turn into a fake action movie. The honest version is more interesting. The bones give us hard evidence. The missing moments force us to stay humble. What does the evidence support? First, mammoth hunting was not the work of one superhero. At a site like Naco, several stone points appear around one enormous animal. Whatever the exact sequence, this was a group problem rather than an individual contest. One person could watch the herd. Another could watch the ground. Someone else could keep track of the rest of the group. No single human became stronger, but several humans could notice several dangers at once. The advantage becomes clear in the smallest movements. One person is looking at tracks. One is checking a stone tool. 2 others are watching the mammoth. Behind them, someone carries hide bundles and spare materials. The animal has one huge body. The humans have many eyes, many hands, and many chances to notice that something has changed. Then the wind shifts. The mammoth raises its head. Everyone freezes. A change in wind bends the grass and lifts loose hair. The mammoth raises its trunk. One hunter lifts a hand and the others stop. Survival can depend on a few physical signals noticed at the right moment. For a few seconds, nothing moves except the grass. Breath hangs in the air. One person shifts a foot backward. Another keeps watching the animal's head instead of staring at the tusks. If the mammoth settles, the group can wait. If it turns toward them, the safest choice may be to leave. The important skill is not fearless aggression. It is noticing the moment when a dangerous situation is becoming worse. Tools matter in the same way. A Clovis point is small enough to hold in your hand. A mammoth is large enough to tower over the person holding it. Put the two beside each other and the mismatch looks ridiculous. But the point was never meant to turn a human into a mammoth. Tools allowed human bodies to do things bare hands could not do, while the group tried to control when and how close the encounter became, and there was no single mammoth hunting method used everywhere. Across the Ice Age, different human groups lived in different landscapes and used different technologies. North American Clovis sites tell one part of the story. Eurasian hunters lived in other environments and left other kinds of evidence. Some mammoth remains show clear human activity. Others may have been scavenged after natural deaths. A stone tool beside a bone does not automatically prove a kill. That distinction matters because not every mammoth bone beside a human tool marks a successful hunt. Now move about 20 kilometers north of Naco to another Arizona site. In 1955 and 1956, archaeologists excavated the Lehner Mammoth site in the San Pedro Valley. The deposits were remarkably dense, remains of 9 immature mammoths, 13 projectile points, 8 butchering tools, and charcoal from 2 fires. The evidence is tangible enough to picture piece by piece. A shallow stream bed, mammoth bones exposed in gravel, stone points on the ground, dark charcoal where fires once burned, cutting tools beside the remains. Suddenly, prehistoric cooperation is not a floating word. It is a place filled with objects. The fires are especially useful because they pull us past the instant of danger. A successful encounter did not end when the animal stopped moving. A body that large created hours of work. Useful foods and materials had to be processed where the animal lay. Tools became dull. Hands became tired. Daylight changed. People still had to watch the surroundings. At Lehner, the details sit almost side by side. A mammoth bone rests in old stream gravel. A stone point lies nearby. A dark patch of charcoal marks where a fire once burned. Another tool sits among the remains. Together, those objects show that people stayed, worked, and handled practical tasks after the most dangerous moment had passed. After the noise and danger, the work could become almost quiet. Someone sits near a fire and scrapes a tool clean. Another person lifts a heavy bundle. Smoke drifts low over the ground. The mammoth is no longer charging or turning, but the group is still busy, tired, and alert. Even success created new problems. A carcass this large could not simply be lifted and carried away. People had to decide what could be used first, what could be moved, and how long they could remain exposed beside the remains. Cold, fading light, tired hands, and scavenging animals could turn a successful day into another test of judgment. So the hunt was connected to camp long before and long after the dramatic moment. Before leaving, somebody had repaired equipment, somebody had prepared clothing, somebody had kept a fire alive, somebody had carried food. Afterward, people worked beside bones, tools, hide, smoke, and embers. These are the physical pieces behind the word culture. And this is where the real human advantage becomes visible. Imagine a younger hunter crouched beside an older one. The older person points to a mammoth track pressed into mud. No lecture, just a finger, a footprint, and a glance toward the herd. Later, beside a fire, a damaged tool is replaced while someone watches. The next morning, the group takes a different route around a wet patch of ground. That is knowledge, but now you can see it. A hand points. A tool changes hands. A path is avoided. A mistake from yesterday alters what happens today. Nothing about the human body has changed, but the group is no longer starting from zero. This also explains why retreat belongs in the story. If the herd is too alert, if the weather turns, or if the ground becomes dangerous, the smartest move may be to leave. The mammoth does not need to be defeated every time. The humans only need enough successful encounters, enough safe returns, and enough remembered mistakes for the strategy to keep working across generations. That is a very different picture from the fearless caveman. Fear is useful here. Cold hands, a sudden rumble, grass moving in the wrong direction, a giant head turning toward you. Those sensations force attention. The person who notices first can signal the others. The group that walks away can try again another day. Bravery without caution produces a great story once. Caution produces people who are still alive to tell stories later. And mammoths gave people powerful reasons to accept some risk. One animal could provide a large amount of food and useful raw material. Bone and ivory could be worked, hide, and other tissues could be used. But mammoths were not the only thing humans ate, and that flexibility mattered. People could hunt smaller animals, gather available plants, fish in some environments, and use carcasses they had not killed themselves. In other words, survival did not depend on winning one spectacular battle. It depended on having options. That may be the biggest twist in the whole story. We remember mammoth hunting because it looks impossible. A small human beside a giant animal, a stone point beside a huge rib. But the people who survived were not trying to prove they were fearless. They were trying to come back. Now return to the frozen plain. The mammoth is still ahead of you. Its breath hangs in the cold air. One person is watching its head. Another is watching the herd behind it. Someone near you grips a tool, but nobody rushes forward. The wind changes, the animal shifts, a hand rises, and the entire group stops. Maybe today becomes a hunt. Maybe it does not. That choice is the answer. Humans hunted mammoths without becoming stronger than mammoths. They did it by turning one impossible contest into a chain of smaller decisions. Noticing tracks, reading the herd, working together, using tools, stopping when conditions turned bad, and carrying what they learned into the next encounter. At Naco, 8 Clovis points remain part of the archaeological record of one mammoth. At Lehner, bones, tools, and ancient charcoal preserve another moment of human activity. Those sites do not tell us every step, they tell us something better. This happened. Small humans really did stand in the world of giants, and somehow they kept coming home.